Welcome to Struck by Science, a podcast of the Polish Academy of Sciences Center in Vienna.
Good afternoon. My name is Piotr Szlanta. I'm director of Scientific Center of the Polish Academy of Sciences branch Vienna. It's a great pleasure to welcome our today's speaker, Dr. Sonia Horonziak from Polish Institute of Public Affairs, a Polish think tank which is concentrated on the political sciences. Dr. Horonziak is former scientific cooperator of my station. I had the pleasure to work with Sonia for 2 years. Now she's political analyst and project coordinator in the Democracy and Civil Society program in already mentioned Institute of Public Affairs. Dr. Horonziak, who graduated from Jagiellonian University, where she also defended her PhD thesis, am I right?
Yes, of course.
Is specialist in political polarization, and topic of our conversation is exactly political and social polarization in the context of European Union, European Union. Okay, to wytniemy. So, firstly, let's try to define the phenomenon itself. What is social and political polarization? How can we define this phenomenon? After all, political disputes are integral part of democracy of any political systems. Democratic societies have always been and still are divided in terms of political views and sympathies.
Thank you for having me, first of all. And yes, it's great to have a podcast with my former employer, Polish Academy of Sciences in Vienna. And it's a pleasure to speak to you, Piotr, as well. So when it comes to the political polarization, yes, there's always this problem when it comes to defining it, because to some extent, in every system, there's a gradual amount of polarization, because this is how the system operates. There must be polarization between different views, so that can we discuss together and produce some outcomes. However, contemporary, where we think and talk about political polarization, we think about clear division into the polar opposites of ideological views, usually towards extremes and outside of the political center. So, referring to the classical divisions, we would say that, for example, politics is not right, left, and center politics, but rather far right, far left, and nothing in the middle ground. And political polarization is something that fuels this division, but of course, it depends on the extent of this division. So, in some systems, like the two-party systems, to some extent, it's great to have polarization because it motivates people to, concentrate around some separate issues. However, in multi-party systems and in the multi-party systems, it's not very great to have political polarization, especially when it denies any type of conversation, discourse, and compromise in the society. And when defining political polarization, I really like to refer to Emilia Palonen, because she described polarization as political tool and division between us and them. And everything around us is everything great and positive, and everything around them is automatically negative, not very positive. And when we think about like that, about polarization, it's very hard to think how polarized society and how polarized politics can produce any outcomes in the democratic systems, because democratic systems are built on compromise, on discussion, and not on the strict polarization of the views.
Okay, so when, according to you, did started this process, when polarization became a real threat for the stability of democratic societies? Because, as you mentioned, for example, in two-party system, So this clear division between two parties is pretty obvious for everyone, and it drives politics. But I can also argue that in a multiply political parties system, it could be also useful, because when we have two political camps, it's just too easy to reign, to make a government. But anyway, when did it started? Because as I already mentioned, and you agree, these political divisions are present in the politics since ancient times.
Of course, and when we talk about political polarization, it's not like it's a phenomenon of the last couple of years. However, when we look at the politics in the couple of years, we see that by now the politics, especially, of course, I'm referring after the 1989, after the beginning of 90s, this outlook, when basically multiple societies tried to create new democracies, usually liberal democracies, based on the compromise, based on the discussion among each other, to produce the best outcome. However, in the last couple of years, we saw that those democracies are actually turning away from the democratic values in order to produce just the political divisions between two parties. What does it mean? And you already mentioned it. It's very simple and it's very useful. But it's useful not for the democratic systems, but it's useful for the populist movements, because it's basically motivates people to take a very hard stance on the issue, but it does not motivate them to think about the issue, to deliberate about the issue, and then maybe produce some middle ground outcomes. And contemporary democracies are usually built on this idea of consensus among many parties. And it's the same even in the two-party system. In the two-party system, this clear division is very helpful. However, it doesn't mean that there is only one way of operating. Like, for example, when we think about even the democracy in the United States or in the Great Britain, even if there is a two-party system, within those political parties, there are multiple divisions, and they also have to collaborate to produce some outcome. However, when we introduce the political polarization to this, we see that they stopped actually discussing among each other, that just produce one vision for the society to either accept or to deny. So you cannot be in the middle ground. You have to be in favor or you are the enemy. And this is the true problem. And we are observing, like in the research community, a proliferation of the polarization in a couple of last few years. I cannot tell you, the exact date, but after 2014, 15, 16, we can see that the amount of far right and far left movements, amount of populist governments rising in the European democracies is far more greater than it was a couple of years before. And also because political polarization is very often combined with the democratic backsliding, we are also seeing the democratic backsliding in the many of those countries. So there's no exact date, but this process can be backed for the last 10 years.
Okay, 10 or 15, as you mentioned. So, uh, if so, so why polarization is a danger for society? How polarization affects society in the long term? Which are the long term consequences of this phenomenon? You mentioned that polarization fuels, I would say, populistic movements. So, uh, is it real so danger for our society to be so deeply political divided and to have only two possibilities of choosing two political camps?
Mhm. It is, I would say that for me, and I think that many researchers would agree, it is quite dangerous. Because when we are thinking about contemporary polarization, we are thinking also about affective polarization. What does it mean? Not only that the society or politics is clearly divided into the two camps, but also we start to think more highly, more positively about members of our own group, and more negatively, as in terms of enemy, basically, about the members of the other group. And this is not good for a society, because the politics applies not to half of the society or some group of this for the society, but it applies to all of us. So it leads to the situation when you have the society, you have like some party that won through the polarization, won the elections, for example, but they are, applying order to the part of the society. What it also does, that even within this one group, would because we are talking about societies, thousands and millions of people, and you are pushing them to think one thing. And this is clearly visible if you actually ask people what they think about some given question. If you ask them about without any political context, they will give you a multitude of answers about the case. But when you ask them in the context, political context, in a polarized society, they will produce only this or this outcome, which in reality, demise the reasoning, the actual ideas of many people, doesn't give place to discuss, doesn't give place to different opinions, but only produces, two outcomes, and you are either in favor of it or outside favor of it. And of course, from the political level is this highest level. However, when the political polarization spreads among society, it also causes the divisions in civil society, which means that people are less likely to cooperate with each other, even on the case that they are agreeing on, because they are in favor or not in favor of some political party. And without the stable civil society, it's very hard to operate in the society, in the country, in all ways. And I would also say one last thing, what political polarization is leading to, it's quite a danger, especially for minority groups. Because when you are trying to divide the society, minorities are very easy targets to do so through the polarization. So you are because it's very hard even from the political stance to portray half of the society as enemy. However, if you are focusing on the smaller groups, it's very easy to portray them as enemies. So that in the multiple countries, we see it right now during the electoral campaign in the United States, that part of the society are labeled as a danger to the U.S. democracy. However, we see it in the European countries as well. So this is also a danger. And in general, I mean, this is maybe not the direct consequence of political polarization, but it actually connected to it in some little sense. It impoverish of the public debate. So we are more prone, our politicians are more prone to use very divisive, harsh language, even with the notions and stances of hate speech, which is quite dangerous, as I'll say, to many, but usually to the minorities.
So sure, so emotions play a key role in deepening political divisions. Politicians are increasingly appealing to these emotions and fueling the atmosphere of hostility. Likewise, the journalists, disagreements between politicians in the studio, TV studio, who insult each other or even beat each other up, are good to watch and to sell. So, how can we try to lower this temperature of political disputes? To see in our political opponents not our enemies or foes, whom we should, if not kill, but eliminated from the political dispute. Do you have any ideas how to improve or this political atmosphere and how we could reverse this process of polarization?
Of course, I mean, it's a hard topic. It's a very hard topic, because those divisions that are created through politicians, through polarization, many times used by populist governments, as appealing to the people of the country, are very hard to eradicate once planted. However, there are a couple of things that can be done to try to lower the levels of polarization in the country. First of all, and it's based on the very simple human nature, Because when you think about someone or something, you can think highly or badly of them. But when you actually meet them, cooperate with them, collaborate with them, you basically know the person and change attitudes towards them. And based of it, the first thing that I would say is very crucial when it comes to lowering the levels of political polarization in the country is a cooperation between civil society. So civil society must try. However, they should also collaborate with each other because usually when it comes, for example, to civil society organizations, they are focusing around some issue, not all kinds of issues as the politicians do, but rather one, for example, environment or human rights or city development. And then this platform is a great example to actually invite and collaborate between people who may share different views. For example, the great example is like environmental organizations. They are usually not focusing so much on the contemporary politics, but rather this part of politics that applies to the environment. And there you can, meet people from the leftist parties, however, also people from the right parties who are, I don't know, like to go fishing, for example. So basically, what I'm saying that trying to support and develop civil society in the country is very crucial for lowering the levels of political polarization because thanks to it, people can actually meet and collaborate with each other, uh, not taking into the regard their political views. Of course, it is, however, harder to do so uh, in a high polarized society. However, when there are programs, when there are support from European Union, from the outside funds, but from the national funds as well, towards, for example, coalitions of civil society organizations, it encourages them to look out for the partners from the different groups that they would not consider working with before. This is the one thing that I would say. The other thing when it comes to lowering the political polarization is actually trying to refer to the data and to the research. And as a researcher, it is very important for me. And let me tell you why. Because in political polarization, like in polarized societies, as you've already mentioned, you have, two opposite camps, two views, us versus them. And it makes you think about issues in the bipolar way. So either you are pro-abortion or against abortion. If either you are pro-migrants or against migrants. You don't see any middle ground because it is not allowed in a polarized society. However, when you actually, do the research and check about how is it in reality, what people are thinking in reality about different issues, you see that there is a lot of middle ground among society, that people are having actually centralist views, maybe central right, central left, and not only those far right and far left movements. Sometimes we think about something, but we think that we know what the society is thinking. We think that we know what everyone is thinking. That then you done a research and you see that it's the other way around. That it's just a stereotype that I widely used by the political parties. For example, in Poland during the previous government rules, during the campaign, parliamentary campaign, the issue of migrants was very high. The issue of migrants was, highly used in a political manner. However, couple of months before the electoral campaign, there were research about Poles' attitudes towards migrants. And there were, those attitudes were spread across the line. Some were a lot of positive, someone like somehow positive, somehow negative, more negative. Only that the politicians took this issue and said, no, Poles are thinking only negatively about migrants. Then the attitude started to change. So it is highly important to, to actually show and share the data with people that we are not two camps. We are multiple camps, and the goal of the democracy should be to discuss, to find the best outcome, and not to set aside, not to set around some two camps and hate each other. Basically, hate each other. Yeah.
Okay, so it's really important. I agree that we should, talk each other and don't regard our political opponents as enemies. We shouldn't dehumanize themselves, which is very often a case. Now I'd like to talk about the digital technologies and influence of digital technologies on political and social polarization. So probably the biggest threat to democracy from the digital realms is disinformation and other forms of informational manipulation. Although hate speech or propaganda are not new, the rise of mobile phones and social media platforms have enabled disinformation to spread at unprecedented speed and scale. And in the digital society, it's very difficult to organize such a civic society, as you mentioned, when people meet each other in the real life, not only in digital sphere. So, what is your opinion about this technological revolution and influence of this digital life upon the political system of democratic countries
Well,
nowadays?
in no doubt, this the digital space makes polarization uh, quite easy to be applied in different societies. And why is that? Because before, even if you hold some very extreme, very even dangerous, anti-democratic, idea, you usually maybe you met some people, you tried to share with them, it didn't catch, you just lost it. There was basically no possibility for you to explore this further. However, nowadays, you just log into to some platform, to the forum, to some blog, you share it. Other people who share maybe the same ideas gather around it, and even for the most anti-democratic, very negative, very hate-forward ideas, you can find online supporters through the new technologies, basically. And of course, politicians use it all the time. If you look about around this year in Europe, I think we had election year, basically. And if you look at the elections at different country, number one threat through each of the almost each of the elections was when it comes to the digital space. For example, Russian influence on the European elections, which was very clear. For example, in Georgia. So definitely, uh, Moldova and the other days, of course. And definitely, it's a very problematic issue because also it's very easy to spread some, dividing hairs between narratives online, but it's very hard to find the source of it. Because for some information, we can assume that maybe it was this group that done that, maybe it was Russian influence, but it's very hard to, link it basically to one person on some organization because it's spread among the web. But of course, there's also another way because thanks to those to this online platforms, you can also share the positive, the best outcomes, the collaborative actions. And I would say that, for example, one of the greatest use of modern technologies is to help us connect, not also within our community, society, or city, but also between countries. So, for example, there are countries in Europe that are suffering through break of the rule of law or democratic backsliding. But people within these countries, networks operating within these countries, they are facing some difficult situations, but they can communicate with other from the other countries. Say, hey, we have the same problem. How did you manage to do this? Recently, I was present at the Central Europe Civic Forum, which gathered the representatives of civil society organizations from multiple European countries. And actually, this was a great example because they met each other. However, on the daily basis, they cannot meet. They're from different countries, but through different technologies, they are now able to actually implement the solutions to hold governments accountable, to lower the political polarization in the country, and to better cooperate with each other. So, of course, there's a great danger coming to the modern technologies, but and it should be addressed in some extent by the government as well. However, it is also a big opportunity. We should not forget it to cooperate further and more between different countries on the given topic, because this is also a way of to lower political polarization because you actually are meeting different people from different contexts, but you see that, oh, we have the same problem. How did you approach that program? You can learn from each other, which I think is the positive outcome of the spread of the new technologies, because in other way around you wouldn't have the possibility to discuss that with other people from other countries.
But the question is how we can not breaking the freedom of the speech, so convince people just to use internet in proper way, to build a community, not to destroy them. And as the uh, everyday political lives shows us, at least to me, so people are more willingly to concentrate themselves in internet life, in internet sphere, to the group with the same, which share the same political opinions. Yeah. So nowadays, so at least it's my opinion. So internet is very useful tool to deepen this political division, also to make a bridges, as you already mentioned. But it's of course $1 million question how we can solve that. So you already mentioned European level. I would like to talk about that maybe now. So uh, can polarized European societies influence European Union decisiveness? How this how European Union works in polarized world?
Well, I think they're actually already are influencing European Union decisiveness, and it's clearly visible because to understand that, we have to understand how the European Union, on what ideas it was built. It was, of course, the union of different nations. However, those different nations think that together they can achieve more, they can achieve better results, they can achieve better world or society. And it's based on the compromise. And number one example for that is for the most crucial decisions of the European Union regarding the foreign policy, financial matters, the uh, the inclusion or exclusion of the European Union members. For those decisions, there is a need for unanimity when it comes to the voting. So each and every member of the European Union had to give consent for something to be pushed forward. And now let's introduce political polarization to it. What does it mean? Of course, usually it will be like some nations have that opinion, some nations have that opinion. Let's talk about it. But within polarized societies, there's no talk about it. We are saying no, and it will be no forever. We will not budge. And we see it, for example, in the case of the Hungary, that we see it in multiple countries when it comes to the, for example, extent of the aid toward Ukraine. Of course, not all of those decisions are affected by the political polarization, but many times there's a shutdown of the discussion and actually, stating on the right side. And it breaks the decisiveness of the European Union, because if someone says that, for example, when it comes to the Ukraine, will not allow them to enter the European Union forever and ever, then what else can be done? The decision must come that there's no place for discussion. And this narrative comes directly from polarization. Like in the democratic community, you would not use that kind of statements. But in the polarized societies, yes, it's very useful because it says we say so, we don't care about the others. And it also creates a divisions in the European Union. Because of course, there were always divisions when it comes to the European Union. For example, there was this division about the countries that take more from the Union than other countries, etc. However, it was always, in the limits of conjoint working together on some operational issues. But then, for example, it was used and turned to extremes in the case of the Great Britain, which ultimately, resulted in leaving the European Union because there was because they used this narrative that they are losing by participating in this union without any discussion. And of course, as of now, we are seeing, and Great Britain is actually seeing what are the consequences of their actions that were not presented at the beginning. At the beginning was presented only one narrative that they are losing by staying in the European Union, and this, caused them to leave it, and the consequences within. So, in summary, I would say that the polarized societies are affecting European Union decisiveness, unfortunately, in a very negative way, very not union friendly way, but more as, individual entities that are gathering around their positions without any possibility to even discuss.
Okay, so political extreme comes in many European countries misuse this polarization to get their political aims at the European level, in the contrary to the European values, as I can understand your opinion. So, why collective action was also what European Union could do with this topic? How to tackle that problem? Why collective action is so important for why collective action is so important for strong civil society and for the future of European Union?
Of course, because it's also a hard topic. Because of course we have to respect the ideas and the states of the different countries. However, as you've mentioned, those European Union values, they are there for the reason. The countries that joined the European Union also agreed to follow those values. And now, by using this rhetoric, they are retreating, but staying in the European Union, influencing its decisiveness. So when it comes to what I believe European Union should do, then for one thing, they should stand and guard the values that the European Union was created on, to not to succumb to those populist rhetoric, because it's just the worst way to do, because it would basically lead to breaking the union and supporting some only national only individual national idea. But it's very hard, for the European Union to make a significant impact on the, given governments. There's elected government of the country. The government is populist. The government is even breaking democratic values right now, as we are seeing, for example, in the Hungary. There's not many things that European Union can do. However, what the European Union can do is can support the civil society within those countries, because civil society is the grassroots movement that actually are operating usually around very important values for the people in those countries, trying to collaborate together, trying to produce this collective action to basically make the country, the society better. Because usually to the society organizations are focusing on the important human rights issues, environmental issues, city issues within this country. They do not try to, tackle the whole politics as the political parties are doing. And European Union, I believe, can support multiple initiatives. On the one hand, in the European Union countries, for example, through some funding, but also between the countries. And I think also a great idea and example is when it comes to the Hungarian presidency EU, that there is also civil society movement about this, to try to influence, the Hungarian presidency to put forward some maybe better, less hate forward ideas for the presidency to come. And I believe that European Union should basically support those kind of initiatives and civil society movements within the European Union members countries and across the countries. So also to promote, collaboration through the funding, through not only substantial, not only financial, but also substantial support to show basically that even if those political parties are not moved at the batch, the society is so much more. There are more people in the society that are in the political party, and we should support them and not only focus on the government that are sitting, around some idea, some issue and won't batch.
Okay, so it's a program for the Polish presidency in European Union for the next
Or-
6 months, if I can
Hopefully.
joke that way. No, no. But so we both are scholars. So, what is your opinion, Sonia, about our task in this issue? Could our environed universities, academia, mm, suggest any solution to depolarize our politics, to make our society more coherent, more willingly to cooperate with each other?
Mhm. Well, I think it's already happening. I think the research scientific community in the Europe basically is collaborating with each other on many different projects devoted, for example, to exploring the idea of polarization, to understand it better, to understand it on the different levels, because of course there are different levels for polarization, and also to find out some ideas to lower it. Those are multiple ideas that are, for example, also supported already by the European Union funds, by the uh, American funds, but also to some extent on the national funds. However, what I believe we should a bit work on in when we produce something and we want to disseminate the research results, for example, that these are the ways to lower the political polarization, or these are the research to better the democratic institutions in the country. We should not only preach to the ones that are already convinced, but we should try and think about targeting people who are on the other opposite side, because we are usually, sharing those research results around scientific communities, around universities, around maybe the biggest institutions, and the places where the actual polarization is happening among people in maybe smaller countries in the countryside. They're not receiving those information. They are not targeted to them. They are not aimed at them. They are not tailored to them, because you cannot just, say produce a research report and say, hey, we did it, apply it. This will not do. So what I believe, the scientific society can do a little bit better and improve is to try to target the groups that are not convinced. Great example is, for example, when it comes to women's movement, try not to only apply it to women, but also to men, because men can be a great supporters for the women's right movement. And it's more, it's perfect when they are. And this can apply, to general political polarization in the different areas. So let's not preach to the convinced. Let's try to address our research results a little bit further.
Mhm. So honestly speaking, I'm a little bit pessimistic about the possibility of reaching, for example, farmers with the result of our article. But it's reasonable, I think, to try to get it in contact with the local politicians. I think, and the local politicians and people who influenced the local society, as for example, clergy, to the some.
Local level is extremely important, and as you said, clergy, local, as the organizations, some interest club. Yes, of course. And even if they, because of course they will have different political views. However, when you produce the outcome, try to tailor them to their needs, to their possibilities. Even when it comes to farmers, You can, of course, do what was done in European Union regarding the nature law, which is a catastrophe, like a image catastrophe for the whole idea, because it was produced so badly. It was used politically. Political polarization, of course, came into place. And of course, then what the people were supposed to do, they just hated the idea in general. However, if you would present it in a different way, if you present it what it actually can bring, can contribute, not only to portray it as some you have to do it because in other way the world will be destroyed, then maybe it would brought some other reactions also from the farmers, for example. So local level is extremely important, and I think in many countries we are forgetting that there is a world outside of the capital, and actually this world is quite vast and quite influential, because in many polarized countries it's actually outside of the main political centers that win and support the populist movement, and they are succumb to this polarization.
Mhm. As in America, today is election day in US, and it's, I think, good example. You mentioned that we should, as scholars, disseminate the results of our research. And at the end of our talk, could you please share with us what is topic of your contemporary studies in your institute?
Of course. So right now, because I'm working within the Central Europe Civic Engagement Program, and right now we are running the research on the young Poles' attitudes towards democracy and also autocracy, how they perceive themselves as Poles, and also what are the attitudes towards civic engagement. And we ask young Poles. It's actually not the first such a research. We've done it since 2018, in 2018, 2020, 2023, and now in 2024. And we want to see, what are the longer patterns. So not what's happening because there's some political issue right now, but how, the attitudes of younger people change. Because I believe also when it comes to polarization, it's great to start with young people, with young generation. It's great to try to reason with them. They are going to, grow out to be actual leaders of the society. So it's great to include them, to talk with them, to engage them, and to see what are they perceiving, for example, of the major challenges in the society, because then they can, it can be better addressed, because this is what's important for them, because we are usually forgetting that younger people, even if we think about them that maybe not that mature as the older generations, are actually a vital crucial point part of the society. And it's great to actually educate them, because then maybe we won't have to safeguard ourselves against polarization, because we already educated people enough so they can do it by themselves.
It's a question, of course, of the position of the school system and effectiveness of that, because schools should teach the respect to each other. Yeah, that students should respect each other, also schools should maintain a culture of the dialogue and to accept the otherness. Yeah, so if we are talking about depolarization, maybe it's a proof that there's something wrong with our school system, not only uh, in European country, but overall the world. But of course, it's topic for the other discussion. So thank you very much, Sonia, for being with us. Um, and I hope that you could disseminate the results of your topic amongst as far as possible part of our
The report is
society.
the full report from the research is coming. It will be probably present like in December in the Institute of Public Affairs. So I will try to disseminate as good as possible, especially targeting young people, not only preach to the convinced. So I would try.
Okay, so thank you very much for this conversation. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.